Hi guys, and welcome to today's introduction webinar to business model innovation. So what's the program for this session? In the next 40 to 45 minutes, I'm going to introduce you to the business model innovation topic. What is it about? Why is that so important? And then in a second step, we're going to have an overview of the St. Gallen Business Model Navigator. So first of all, before we start talking about it, think about your everyday life. You probably drink coffee, right? Do you know how much do you pay for 1 kilo coffee, either at the supermarket or for an espresso machine? Let me just give you something here. So if you go to the supermarket here in Germany, for example, you're gonna pay around 10 euros per kilo. But if you drink Nespresso coffee, you can pay up to 145 euros for 1 kilo of coffee. So we're still talking about the same product, but because of the different business model that Nespresso is offering, customers are actually willing to pay more for the same thing they could have for up to 50 times less the price at a supermarket. Why is that? Because Nespresso just doesn't only offer a cool lifestyle product. It's just about the business model, how they build the whole business around the coffee drinking. And what does it tell us about business modeling? While business model and especially innovative business models are just a way to differentiate yourself from the competition because it provides you another competitive advantage. Why is that? So if you compete on the product innovation level, which is very important, product innovation, new technologies are the basic thing, and it's getting more and more important, especially with the new waves of digitalization and so on. But if you compete on the product innovation level, you're gonna compete features to features with other products and companies, right? If you compete on a process level, it's going to be process innovation against process innovation, optimizing against versus optimizing, which means basically pricing competition. But if you have a business model on top of that, which is completely different and very innovative, addressing specific pains and needs of the customers, then you're going to have a new advantage against the competition that is not focusing on a business model, but just on processes or products. So that's why we think on top of product and process innovation, you definitely need to focus on how to innovate the business model and how to expand the business model portfolio and build new business models around customer needs and pains for the future. But why is that important to do business model innovation? Well, of course, I just mentioned this, it has a new competitive or another competitive advantage, but if you have a look at the companies we are seeing here, you know Kodak, you know Nokia, BlackBerry, you know Yahoo, and maybe you know Thomas Cook, which is one of the latest that went bankrupt because they actually have held way too long on their old business model. So they were not believing that there is another option than the currently successful traditional business model. And because they lack the competency or maybe the willingness to develop new ones and try to change things, they pretty much disappear or are not as relevant as they were a couple of years ago, right? Another point I would mention here, we are actually living in a very specific time since the breakout of the virus worldwide. And that's why we think it's very important to be ready to innovate your business model, because any change in the ecosystem is an opportunity to do something new and ensure that the success of the company, for example, is going to last over and over independently of any crisis. So we do think that the current situation is, of course, very hard for companies and for our society, but it's also a very great and interesting opportunity to innovate, do something new, create new business models. What we know is that it's very different to innovate around the business model. So back then, PMI Lab, as a spin-off of the University of St. Gallen, of the Technology Institute, the institute were doing a research project around business model innovation, and one of the questions was, why do companies struggle to innovate their business model or develop an innovative business model? And they identified through the research 3 challenges I want to introduce you right now. So the first one is the thinking in business models. If you take like 5 to 10 seconds to think about your own definition of a business model, reflect on that, I'm pretty sure we're going to have a different one. And before we start, it's very important to say we talk about business model innovation. Innovation is not an invention, so it's a successfully market introduction of the invention. Otherwise, it's just a new product or a new service, right? So it's very important to have this notion of market introduction and success on the market to define innovation. Now, you thought about your definition of a business model. Here's ours. So it's a magic triangle with 4 dimensions. The first dimension of the business model is the who dimension. It's about your target customer. Who are you addressing? What are the pains and the needs of this segment? The second dimension is the what dimension. What do you offer to your target customer? What is the value proposition? What are the services and the products behind the value proposition? And then the third dimension is, of course, how do you create the value proposition you are offering to the target customer? So the how dimension is all about the value chain, the partnerships behind your business model. And the last one is the question about the revenue models and the profitability. So why is the whole business model profitable? How do we generate revenues? What are the costs? And why is it profitable on a long term? And now we talk about business model innovation if you change at least 2 of the dimensions. So why 2? Because if you only change the first one, the target customer, so if you change the segment, it's basically a new market. That's not innovation. If you change the what dimension, you're basically offering a new product, a new service. It's still not innovative. It can be a technological innovation, but it's not a business model innovation. If you change the how dimension, it's basically a process optimization, a new partnership, new resources. So it's again more on the process level. It's not on a business model level. And usually when you change something about the revenue model and the way you spend money and earn money, you're going to change something different. One of the good examples we see pretty often in large companies is when you go from a traditional revenue model to a subscription model, for example. So a monthly billing for service. Typically, you have to change the processes for controlling, for invoicing, and for example, for SAP, if you work with SAP. So you always have an influence on one of the other dimensions. So remember, a business model has 4 dimensions. That's the first thing. And then we talk about business model innovation if we change at least 2 of the 4 dimensions. Now, there is a second challenge here. And this is the challenge is that most of the companies are struggling to think outside the box, outside the dominant logic of their own branch, right? So one of the example is here, Salesforce. Why that? Why is that? Because Salesforce came in the late 90s and said, basically, this is the end of the software because we are offering a cloud-based platform for CRM, whereas all the competitors were offering traditional software based on installation and customization. And now, 20 years later, what happened? All of the solutions are cloud-based and there is no traditional software anymore. So he was right, disrupting the industry logic and establishing a new one. And most of the companies are struggling with that. So that's one very important challenge. Think outside your own industry, dominant industry logic. The third challenge, and that's where we are approaching the whole business model navigator topic. The third challenge is that if you take an architect or software developer, these people know which rules they have to follow to develop a building or a software. If you do business, there is no such a systematic approach, right? So it's a bit difficult for people doing business and building business models to know what kind of systematic rules and approach they have to follow. So back then, a couple of years ago, the university and two professors in St. Gallen started a research project, and they analyzed over 250 successful companies and business model innovations in the past decades, and trying to answer the questions: why is it so hard? What is a business model innovation? And how do we develop a business model, innovative business models? So that was part of a large research project, which um, basically took place there. And one of the results were over these 250 successful business model innovations, 90% of the business model were recommendation of existing patterns. So we do have existing business model patterns. And if you take all of them, you're gonna be able to visualize probably around 90% of all the business models of the world. The other 10% they are basically the one that are inventing future business model patterns. How many patterns do we have? So there are 55, or at least back then there were 55 single business model patterns that you can use to recombine in order to visualize 90% of the business models of the world. That's the result. That's a visualization of the 55 patterns. Is the business innovation map. If you zoom in, for example, here, we can see Amazon Store, eBay, Netflix, Black Sox. They all combine different patterns, and that's very important. A pattern is not a business model. It's just a part of a business model. So you're going to have to need to take more of the pattern than one pattern to combine them and put them together to have one whole business model. Here is another visualization of the patterns. So I told you before, we at the end of the research project, we had 55 patterns, but since then a lot happened. So we now have 60 of them. If you want to have a look, a more detailed insights on the patterns, either by our pattern cards, I'm going to show you the links afterwards, or on our homepage, you can find some links as well. Or you can go to businessmodelnavigator.com. Here you can find 55 of them, pretty much detailed, with a lot of examples and more stuff about each one of them. Just to give you a better understanding of what is a pattern, let's have a look at this one, the razor and blade one. So razor and blade is based on quite a cheap product, but very expensive, high margin consumables. It's named after one company you probably all know, but if you have a look at back then, what's the first company that used this kind of pattern? It was Rockefeller with the American Standard Oil Company back then in 1880. The goal for them was to export oil to Asia. And one of the idea was to sell or give away oil lamps to Asian population. So around half of the 400 plus thousand oil lamps were sold for the manufacturing price, and the other ones were just given away. And every oil lamp had one oil filling already in it, right? So people started to use the lamps, and at some point they were in need for oil, and that's where the Standard Oil Company started to sell them the oil afterwards. So that's the very first time we've seen this pattern happen. And then afterwards, from Gillette, which the name is coming from, over to HP, Nespresso, and Apple, we can see the pattern working in different companies. Why Apple, you may wonder? Apple did the opposite. So it's the razor blade the other way around. So you have a very expensive product, which could be an iPod, an iPad, an iPhone, and then you have very cheap consumables like apps, for example. So now that's only one part of the answer to the challenge, missing the systematic approach, right? So, okay, we do have patterns, but what do we do with that? First of all, it's very important to know it's a moving topic. So if you have a look at the different web waves or digitalization waves, you're going to see each wave brings new patterns, and some of the old patterns are getting adjusted or adapted, or they may disappear at some point. And we are right now in the next phase where emerging technologies are probably going to generate new patterns we don't know yet, but we are working on. So it's something that's moving with the technology, with the whole development of our world and society. We know there is a finite amount of patterns we can use to visualize and define business models, but how do we innovate business model? That's the question we need to answer. There is 3 strategies. First of all, to use the patterns. To build a business model, you can transfer the pattern, saying, I've seen a company doing that, I'm going to do the same. You can combine different patterns and say, I've seen a company doing this, a razor blade, I've seen a company doing a lock-in, and then I have seen a company selling directly without third-party retailer, and then that's Nespresso model. Or you can say, like Nestle did that, oh, I had a pattern or different patterns and business model working for one business unit, one product line, why not just repeating that on other product lines I have? So that's the case with tea and baby drinks, baby milk for Nestle, for example. And the other approach is called the Sangalan Business Model Navigator, and it's a 4-step approach to design and develop and implement innovative business model using business model patterns. You may or may not know the approach yet. There is a book about it. You're gonna find the links either in the description below or on the last slide of this presentation. And I would like now to give you some insights about each one of the phases. Maybe it's good to start with an example first. You probably know the company Holcim, which is a company selling and producing concrete and cement. And if you have a look at the traditional business model of the company, well, first of all, they are addressing building companies and selling them different products like concrete or cement or different mixes, and they deliver them to the building site, construction site, if you want. How do they do that? They have a mass production with very complex processes for the raw products, and then they have a whole sales and marketing departments that are basically selling the products to the target customer. How they get paid? They're just selling the material for 1 cubic meter or 1 ton, or could be different models, but basically it's depending on the weight of the delivered product. Now, if you have a look at Holcim in Indonesia, Holcim, like any other people and company in Indonesia, is facing a huge traffic jam, right? And that's nothing new. But back then, one of the person working there he was just thinking, could we solve the problem of traffic jam? Is there something we can do about it? And the idea came actually when he was attending an internal conference where one of the colleagues from product development presented a new technology of a concrete that is drying very, very fast, much faster than traditional concrete. And that's where the new idea for a business model started. The idea is called the Speedcrete, and let's just have a look at the business model again. So the 4 dimensions, we do have a completely new target customer, which are cities or governments. You are selling them the whole turnkey repairing solution. So it's not, I'm selling you concrete, like 10 tons of concrete. I'm selling you a whole repairing solution for a road, for example. And I'm promising you that it's going to be repaired within 7 hours. And the value proposition behind that, which is very interesting, because that's only the solution, the product, if you want. Behind that, you are selling a city the reduction of traffic jams and also the reduction of CO2 emissions. Of course, very important central piece of the business model is on the how dimension, the technology, the quick drying cement technology. And the new thing, the part of the innovation is as well, you need a new way to sell the product. So you need a new sales and marketing approach. you need some technicians because it's a new technology, and you, of course, because you say it's going to be ready in 7 hours and it's a turnkey solution, you need a very closed and detailed monitoring of the whole process, reparation process, and that you can only do it with new partners, so new suppliers, which are in this case subcontractors for the reparations. What's really important, you have here a new target customer, you have new processes, it's a new solution, but you also have a totally new revenue model. And that's the very interesting part. So Holcim said, we promise that if you buy our repairing solution, within 7 hours, we're gonna repair your road. If it's not the case, you pay nothing, it's for us. If we succeed and manage within less than 7 hours, you pay for each square meters of the repairs road. So that's a very interesting way of monetizing the technology. And on the other side, of course, because of the new processes, technology, and contractors, you have new costs that are popping out in the model. So that's basically a short example of business model innovation, how you transform a basic, concrete offering into a very interesting turnkey solution, pay-per-performance model based. So now let's go through the process. Imagine we are a Holcim and we want to think about, okay, we need to solve a new problem. We need to do something new. How do we process? So the first thing is to initiate the whole approach. How do we initiate? We want to achieve 3 goals. The main one is understanding the own business model. I do need to understand what I'm doing right now as an established company before starting thinking about something new. Very important. Second step, I need to understand the ecosystem. I know what I'm doing. I need to know what's going on around myself, what's happening, what are the trends and other possibilities to find new opportunities. And that's the third goal of the initiation phase. Find new opportunities to innovate. How we do that? You know the magic triangle right now. So that's the first thing. You have to draw the business model, the magic triangle, the 4 dimensions of the current business to make sure everyone in the team or in the company, whoever is joining the whole innovation process or project, if you want, to make sure that they're talking about the same thing. And then we can have a look at the business ecosystem. So the ecosystem is basically, on the one hand, you have yourself in a very narrow ecosystem, which are the partners and the users or customers. What is happening here? Do we see some changes in the needs and the pains, or do we see a shift in the organizations that we are getting new customers or new users, for example? And then in the wider sense, the ecosystem is, for example, what's happening around technology. Is there a new technology that could disrupt our business or change something within our business? Are there some new laws or regulations or political decisions that are going to influence our business model? The same for culture, environment, society, or for competitors and new entrants like a startup. So what are within this ecosystem the change drivers that could lead us to innovation opportunities? That's one of the central questions using this tool. Once you know that, the next step is we know what we do, we know where we could work towards, like we do have some change drivers, we have an idea, let's generate business model ideas. How does it work? So you've seen the business model patterns. We have a card set of the patterns, so you use cards you can hold in your hand, and we have 2 principles to apply the cards. You can have one principle that is called the Similarity Principle. It's basically having a look at the 60 business model patterns and say, can I take some of them that are related to my industries? For example, I don't know, if I do telecommunication, it's a very low regulation market. So is there something similar where we know these kind of patterns had success in the past. That's the first way to use the cards. The second one is the confrontation principle, and there you will work with business model patterns that are completely different from your industry. So it means if you are a retailer, for example, like a supermarket, then let's go for looking for patterns that had success in the space industry, for example. And then you're gonna have ideas that are gonna be probably very, very disruptive for your business, but mixing that with the first principle, you're gonna have a very good mix of different ideas for different time horizons. If I may give you a piece of advice how to use the cards. So we usually say a group for ideation should be around 3 to 5 persons. Um, the ideal situation is not to be at home or not to be at the office. It's like a room where you can be creative and think free. That's one thing. And then you select the cards. How do you select the cards? Well, you use the two principles I was talking just before. And then if you, let's admit you are a group of 5 person, you select, because it's going to take not longer than an hour, you're going to select 7 to 8 cards. So if you have 8 cards, choose 4 of the cards that are more similar to your industry and 4 that are more on the confrontation principle. How do we choose the cards is a question we get very, very often. So we have the experience, of course, as a BMI lab because we do that very often. But if that's the first time for you, just go in the preparation of the ideation session, go through all the 60 cards. That's the first thing. Have a look at all the 60 ones. And then try to filter which ones are similar to our industry, which one are very different. Next step. Third step would be if you have, let's say, I don't know, 20 similar and 15 not related, try to prioritize them. Like, do you think you're gonna have idea and be creative if you use this card, or do you think it's gonna be difficult? How do you think the group is gonna react? And then just try it out. There is no right and wrong. Very often, our customers are asking, why, what if you would choose we chose the wrong patterns. There is no wrong or right. We don't know. There is no possibility to know which pattern is going to have the best influence on the creativity and the ideation. So it's just going to try it and then do another ideation round with other patterns if you feel the ideas are not the best you had. That's not a problem as well. You can do some iteration there. That's the whole process is a iterative process. After your ideation session, you're going to have a bunch of new ideas. So one group can have up to 30, 50 or more ideas. If you take 2 or 3 groups, it can be up to 100 or 200 ideas. We have to filter that because we went for quantity in the ideation step. Now we want a bit of quality in there. How do we do that? We have a very easy filter. It's a 2x2 matrix. The dimensions are very different. So here's an example how we would work with a dimension business potential and difficult to copy. I would evaluate the idea, just putting the idea as the post-its, for example, on the matrix and say, the first idea, I think that's here. It's quite easy to copy. It's not the highest potential we have. Because in relation, relatively to idea 1, we have idea 2, where I would say the potential is much higher and it's a bit more difficult to copy. And then if you go on and go on, you're going to have ideas on your map. And then you choose for the highest potential and the hardest idea to copy for other competitors. So that's one example with these 2 dimensions. Of course, you could have time to market as one dimension. You could have added value for the customer, or you could have internal added value as well. You have a lot of possibilities. Here again, there is a whole list. So if you have some questions, just reach out, send an email to us. We're happy to support you in the process. Once you've chosen 1 or 2 ideas, it's still just an idea. You can't really describe that and talk about the idea with someone yet. And that's what the integration phase is for. Integration phase means, first of all, getting from a business model idea to a business model concept. Very important, because a concept is something you can talk about with someone, for example, customers. It's about detailing the revenue models, at least the potential ones. Having a look at, is it consistent? Does it work? How do we, the way we imagine the revenue model? And the third part is one of the most important one in the very early stage of the development, is to validate the problem solution fit. If you have a look at the consistency of the business model, so the first thing is make it a concept. That's what we use the idea sheet for. Idea sheet is just a much simpler way to visualize a business model, just like a business model canvas with a bit less detail, because we think that a business model canvas, for example, is a very good tool for a later stage. So after a first validation, for example. Here we have an idea sheet. You can download that on our homepage. It's a free resource. It's basically the 4 dimensions of the magic triangle, just visualized with supporting questions, just to help you getting so many details, as many details as possible for this very early stage. And then on the other hand, we have the reverse financials tool. What is that? It's a tool that allows us from a bottom-up perspective, so from profits, margin, and revenues through the costs, to have a look at the different revenue streams we think we could have around the business model, and have a look at their consistency. Does it work the way we think our subscription model should be? That's more the internal view of the concept, the business model concept, if you want. And as I mentioned, it's very important to go out and validate the problem and solution at the very beginning. And that's why we usually do problem solution interview. What is a problem solution interview? It's basically a very open interview. It's qualitative, so you don't have to talk to 2,000 people. It's enough to talk to 5 to 10 or 12 person of your target group. And there you want to well, first of all, validate you addressing the right problems and the right customer segments, right? Is there a user beyond the customer? So is the person using the solution a different person from the person who buys it, for example? You want to make sure you're addressing the right needs as well, and you want to understand what kind of solution do your customer use right now, and where is the problem within the solution. And the solution part of the interview is more about our idea, our business model concept, and just starting to talk to the customers about it and say, are you interested in hearing more about it? That could be a first assessment for a later pilot customer, for example. Are you willing to pay for the solution? What kind of features would you like to have? So how should our minimum viable product or offering should look like? So that's the whole part about what we call external consistency. You want to make sure your idea, your business model concept is consistent with the expectations and the needs, the problems of your target customer. Once we've done that, we are coming back. We are adjusting the business model concept, and that's time for the implementation part. So you can see here some arrows, try and learn, and that kind of representation. It's basically because for all of you, those of you that know the lean startup approach, it's here implementation is based on a lean startup approach. So it's building something, measuring the results, and learning. What we want to achieve is we want to work based on assumptions. Assumptions are facts, and you can measure the results. It's easier than just based on opinions, and we at this point don't use opinions at all. We have different milestones in the development. So first of all, you're gonna validate the problem solution fit before you think about the value delivery. And then after the problem solution fit, as I mentioned already, you're gonna think about the product market fit, what kind of features, which are the features we should have in the solution, in the product, how big is the market, is also part of the product market fit. And then once you have that, you have a clear idea about the features, how is my solution looking like. Now I want to assess the different revenue possibilities. So maybe I already know that my customer is willing to pay, but haven't told the customer if it's like 100 euros a month or if it's €1 million for each product. I don't have, I didn't tell the customer enough about the revenue model yet. So that's the step I'm going to take right now. You have different possibilities to test that. And once you know how you make money, you can think about the processes behind that and how do we create the value and deliver the value to the customer. The last part is more once you have your whole business model, if you want, you have, I don't know, maybe a first pilot or a first MVP on the market. You're gonna think about how can I scale the business model and make it very, very profitable on a very large scale, and what are the KPIs behind that? And the goal behind that is very easy. We want to reduce the uncertainties we have about our idea, and that's what the assumptions are for. Each milestone, each phase of the validation process is a small cycle we call a business model testing cycle. So it's basically starting from your business model concept, going through the assumptions, the hypothesis, and building some tests to validate the hypothesis. How do we do that? We have 22 testing cards. The business model testing cards are basically another tool to think about how could we test and validate different hypotheses or assumptions with customers. So do I do an interview? Do I do an explainer video? Do I do the landing page? Do I build a physical prototype? Do I do, I don't know, a concierge test? We identified 22 ways to test business model ideas. And once we have chosen one or two, we go further through the cycle and set up the whole test. We, of course, do the test, and then we measure. That's very important. We measure the results. How do we measure? Because we knew before, because we have hypotheses, what we want to measure and what we want to learn, and the results are going to be used to update the business model concept we have and go on to the next milestone. Or if we didn't validate enough, we just go through the next iteration. So it could be on this point, at the early stage, for example, you say, okay, I do have a problem validation fit. I thought about features. I did a test. There is no validation here. It's falsified. Maybe I should do another ideation about the features. Could be. Or maybe I should do another ideation session about revenue model. Could be as well. So that's why it's a cycle. You go on and repeat the steps every time as you develop your model further. So that's basically it. That's a rough overview of the business model navigator and the whole business model innovation topic. If you want to learn more, we do have different possibilities. So the first one is you can buy the pattern cards as well as the testing cards, by the way. If you click on the link here, it's on Amazon. Just have a look. Search on Amazon for 55 pattern cards or 22 testing cards. You're going to find BMI Lab there, and you can order them, and they're going to arrive within a couple of days, and you can start right now working with it. If you want to read more about what we do and the research and maybe some experiences we do with our clients and within the innovation industry, we do have a LinkedIn profile, but we also have a homepage. So we're happy about any new follower on LinkedIn, of course, and we are very happy to have you on our blog or downloading our resources. By the way, all the resources are for free, so don't hesitate. You're going to receive 1 or 2 emails from us maybe, but you can download pretty much any tool we use during the workshops. And last but not least, if you're interested in learning more about business model innovation and especially the business model navigator approach, we do offer workshops. So right now it's more online workshops, but once we are done with the breakout of the virus, we're gonna have physical workshops again. What is a workshop? It's basically a training where, using a case within a group, you're gonna develop an innovative business model idea for a company that doesn't exist, or maybe it exists, but it's at least another name. You develop innovative business model ideas. You learn how to use the tools, the do's and don'ts. Something like, is it better to do a survey on interview? That kind of things, and then you learn how to implement that. We also have a specific workshop for business model testing if you want more on the link here. And very important, every workshop we do, you're gonna get a certificate of completion. So it's something you can use for your CV, for your LinkedIn profile, and so on. You get access to all the tools, and each person participating is getting one set of pattern cards, one set of testing cards, and depending on the location, we can also provide you with one book about the business model navigator. So don't hesitate, have a look at that. Happy to answer your questions. You can find my email on our homepage. My name is Charles. I'm from the German BMI Lab team based in Munich, and I was very happy to give you an overview today during this webinar. Have a good one, guys. Bye.